Friends, this is Miss Saffron, and I'm going to be going over East Asia's physical geography notes. These are one of the two sets of notes that you should have reviewed this week in our online learning adventure. So let's get started. So East Asia has a fairly rugged terrain due to collisions of tectonic plates over millions of years. So you have convergent boundaries literally running in to the mainland in Asia on the Asian plate. And that is causing the terrain to be really hilly, really mountainous, really hard to move around, especially during ancient times. The rugged terrain has limited the people's interactions with the outside world and limited movement inside Asia as well. So as a result, Asia has a lot of isolated people who tend to be really wary of foreign people and ideas. They're used to being isolated. They're used to kind of being in their village. They're used to being within their own culture, their own language. There's many dialects of the Chinese language because of how isolated some people are. So this is showing you the Great Wall of China, and you can just see how it goes up and down these mountains right here, and just kind of giving you a visual of how steep these are. And it's kind of crazy. There are people that actually run the Great Wall of China marathon and go up and down all these steps and through these mountains. It's just pretty amazing that people back in ancient times had to get over these boundaries as well. So landforms can be divided into two parts. In the western part of East Asia, there's a lot of mountains and plateaus. On the eastern side, closer to the Pacific Ocean, there's plains and hills. So it starts to go down in elevation. Most of the population lives in the east side, where the land is good for farming and settlement, especially along rivers and the coastlines. So just giving you a visual, like I said, all the brown parts or all this white snow-capped parts, that's going to be deserts, plateaus, areas of higher elevation, mountainous areas. And as we get closer here to the Pacific Ocean, you can see where some green areas start to form. Those are your plains. You can see a little bit of elevation here down in the south, but not as high as it is on the west side. Okay, skipping over that. So there's several mountain ranges that you need to be aware of. The first one, the Kunlun Shan Mountains, are remote interior mountains in West China, north of the Plateau Tibet. So you have the Himalaya Mountains here in Nepal, and then you have this huge tabletop of a plateau that kind of isolates people in that part of China. And then right at the edge, you have this mountain range right here that kind of makes the edge of that plateau. The Atal Mountains are west of the Gobi Desert, so right here. Okay, and they are part of the border of Mongolia and China. The Taishan Mountains are in western China, bordering some of our stand countries right here. And a lot of mountains are going to be used as those natural boundaries, especially in ancient times. That's how kingdoms were decided or territories were decided based on physical geography. So speaking of plateaus, the Plateau of Tibet is high altitude but flat land. So remember, a plateau is like a table. So this is where a lot of our rivers are going to originate, including the Huanghe River and the Tangjiang River. There's not a lot of people. A lot of people cannot live in this area because it is very cold. It is highland climate. You do have quite a bit of Tibetan Buddhist monks that live there. And this area practices mostly Buddhism. So one of the main leaders of the Tibetan Buddhists is the Dalai Lama. This is an area of some conflict between the Chinese government and the monks, which we'll get into later in religions, but just knowing that they're isolated on this plateau. Skipping over the quiz. All right, so there are some plain areas in China and East Asia. So you have the North China Plain, which is going to be right around here, and then the Manchurian Plains, which is right around here. And if you notice, there's going to be a lot of resources, a lot of minerals that are found there, great areas for farming. It's where the rivers dump out at. This is also going to be where most of your population is at. There are some deserts. So when we think of East Asia, a lot of people don't think of deserts. They think of mountains or waterways or bodies of water, but you don't really think deserts. So two big deserts right here. You have the Gobi Desert, which is in northern China and Mongolia, so kind of this like no man's land here. And then the Taklamakan Desert, which is going to be on the west side of the plateau of Tibet. And again, that's that plateau and all those mountains. You can see where it's surrounded by mountains is going to block any rainfall that's going to come in. So that's a very special form of the orographic effect. There's a lot of peninsulas sticking out of East Asia. So remember, a peninsula is a piece of land that is surrounded by water on three sides. So we have some famous ones like the Korean Peninsula, where North and South Korea are at, the Manchu Peninsula down here. You have some other peninsulas that kind of serve as major port cities, great for shipping and exporting. It's where a lot of our goods leave that come to the United States leave from. East Asia also has quite a few islands. One of the most famous islands is Japan. It is an archipelago. So remember, an archipelago is a group of islands that can be small or large. But Japan makes a nice J shape, so that's an easy way to remember that country. But it is a group of islands, so it is considered an archipelago. Other islands, Taiwan, Hainan, and Hong Kong are all famous in this area. The benefits of being an island is it brings you isolation. So you can use that as a defense mechanism. If something's happening on the mainland of East Asia, you're not really involved in that. But it's also a great way for you to have access to trade. And especially because you're there off of the mainland, you get all of the shipments coming in first. So that is some of the benefits of being an island nation in this region of the world. Skipping over the quiz. Okay, going over rivers. So there's a lot of big rivers in this area that are kind of the lifeline of East Asia. Many of the rivers have provided water for ancient civilizations that started here, and they're still providing water resources and places of settlement still today. So the first river we're going to look at is the Huanghe River. It starts in the plateau of Tibet. So remember, it flows down elevation and goes from the plateau of Tibet to the Yellow Sea. It is called the Yellow River, and not because it flows into the Yellow Sea, but because the actual water has this kind of muddy yellowish color to it. And that is because it is carrying a sort of soil or silt called loess that looks kind of yellow, and it makes the water really, really yellow. So there's a lot of farming of wheat and soybeans in this area along the river, but it's also called China's sorrow because this river floods quite a bit, especially during any rainy season, and makes a lot of damage when it floods. But it is considered a cultural hearth because, like I said, a lot of ancient societies, ancient towns, ancient artifacts have been found along this river. You have the Changjiang River, also called the Yangtze River. More than half of China's rice is watered by this river. So rice is a type of crop that needs a wet environment in order to grow and thrive. And so a lot of the rice that is grown in China is along this particular river. It is the longest river in Asia, running right around 3,400 miles from the Tibetan Plateau to the East China Sea. It is also home to one of the world's largest dams called the Three Gorges Dam. And this dam is going to create all of the hydroelectricity for this area along this river. It also helps control flooding. It also provides irrigation and also transportation in this area. You have the Zai River, which is in southern China, also called the Pearl River. It flows south towards the South China Sea. And major trading ports or port cities are along the mouth of this river that allow trade and goods to go back and forth, including Hong Kong. One of our big special economic zones is going to be along that river. And then you have what is called the Grand Canal. So this is the world's longest man-made waterway. It is a canal. So again, it's where we can get ships back in and out of the country, not necessarily using rivers. And we can control the flooding, you can control the water, but you can also allow for transportation up and down elevation. So construction for this canal started in the 400s before Common Era BCE, which is pretty amazing that the ancient Chinese had this already idea or this ability to create. Obviously, because our ships are bigger, it has been expanded and rebuilt several times, and it carries goods from Beijing, the capital of China, to the coast. So China has a lot of resources. Water is going to be one of their main resources that creates hydroelectric power for their millions of people. In southern China, there's a lot of farmland that is useful for growing crops. It's also known as the rice bowl. So if you look at a map of China, it kind of has a belly at the bottom, and that is your rice bowl, so to say, where most of our rice is produced. And then kind of in the wooded areas, there's a lot of forest. You can see from the picture, they use terrace style farming where the water goes down elevation and waters the crops down a hillside. And so that's a pretty easy way for rice paddies to grow. Um, in Japan, the fishing industry is a really big industry, being that it is an island nation. It's going to have a lot of seafood, hence why sushi is such a big cultural food in Japan. It's one of the main dishes it's known for. Uh, there's also a lot of minerals in this area. With all of the mountains and higher elevation, there's going to be a lot more minerals like petroleum, coal, natural gas are all going to have those minerals that you can get. Climate and vegetation, much of East Asia lies on the same latitude as the US. So their climate and vegetation is very similar to what we have. Instead of having hurricanes, they have what is called typhoons or cyclones, and they also experience monsoon rains. They are also along the Ring of Fire. So that Ring of Fire is where the Pacific plate meets other plates and it rubs up against other tectonic plates and creates volcanoes, earthquakes, and tsunamis. Especially in island nations like Japan, they deal with earthquakes all the time. They deal with tsunamis, which are earthquakes that happen in water, and then a tsunami is a big wave that then threatens that country. So they actually have a lot of warnings and a lot of building codes to deal with that. Going over some just kind of main areas of East Asia. So Hong Kong is an area that used to be controlled by the British until 1997 when China took control of it. Hong Kong is a special economic zone, which means that they can practice whatever economic system they want, which is usually capitalism, whereas the rest of China is a communist or command system. And then Macchu is another area that used to be controlled by Portugal until 1999 when that area was given back to China. It's also a special economic zone. So again, they practice capitalism, lots of trade, lots of money flow through there. And yeah, they're helping keep China's economy running. Making sure that is it. All right, and so that is the last section of the East Asia physical geography notes. Definitely go back and look at the notes, take notes over them, try the quizzes out. That way you can be ready for your quiz. But thanks for listening. Bye.